So we'll just read down through Psalm 143 and kind of hit some highlights in review, and then we'll finish up the chapter tonight. But in Psalm 143, verse 1, David is writing, and he says, "Hear my prayer, O Lord. Give ear to my supplications. In thy faithfulness answer me, and in thy righteousness. And enter not into judgment with thy servant. For in thy sight shall no man living be justified. For the enemy hath persecuted my soul. He hath smitten my life down to the ground. He hath made me to dwell in darkness as those that have been long dead. Therefore is my spirit overwhelmed within me. My heart within me is desolate. I remember the days of old. I meditate on all thy works. I muse on the work of thy hands. I stretch forth my hands unto thee. My soul thirsteth after thee, as a thirsty land. Selah. Hear me speedily, O Lord. My spirit faileth. Hide not thy face from me, lest I be like unto them that go down into the pit. Cause me to hear thy loving kindness in the morning, for in thee do I trust. Cause me to know the way wherein I should walk, for I lift up my soul unto thee. Deliver me, O Lord, from mine enemies. I flee unto thee to hide me. Teach me to do thy will, for thou art my God. Thy spirit is good. Lead me into the land of uprightness. Quicken me, O Lord, for thy name's sake. For thy righteousness' sake, bring my soul out of trouble. And of thy mercy, cut off mine enemies, and destroy all them that afflict my soul. For I am thy servant." And so last week we said there in verse 1, it's a prayer of David. David's praying, and he's asking God to hear his prayer. And then he says, "Give ear to my supplications," the request that I'm making. And again, we just pointed out that sometimes I believe that God likes to hear not only our requests, but he likes to hear what it is that we would, or how it is that we would like to see those requests answered. And I don't believe there's anything wrong with that as long as we're not demanding things from God. And yet we can ask of him the things that we would like to have. And then we notice there in verse number 3, he says the enemy is singular. And then verses 9 and 12, we see enemies plural. And so we pointed out there that in verse number 3, he says enemy. He says, "He hath smitten my life. He hath made me to dwell in darkness." And obviously Satan has some power. He has to go to God and make the request. But sometimes God allows him to come into our lives, or to do things in our lives, or to set up things in our lives that we wouldn't necessarily want to happen in our lives. But God allows those things to try us or to test us, and God works in and through those things. And my goofy throat's going to blow me out. It's been okay all day, now it's going to keep scratching. So we work our way down to verse number 6 there, where David says, "I stretch forth my hands unto thee, my soul thirsteth after thee, as a thirsty land, Selah." And the word Selah just simply means stop and think about it. And so we ended at a good time last week, because we ended at that verse and thinking on raising our hands to God and basically pouring out our lives to him, pouring out our hearts, our requests to him, and asking him to help us. But I kind of thought a little bit more on that this week. And the idea, I believe, the more we know God and we know who he is and we know how he works, the more when something comes in our lives, the more likely we are to turn to him. And so the closer we are to him, the closer we grow to him in our relationship with him, the more we understand him, the more we're going to turn to him when things start to go wrong, or maybe the quicker. But we also know that there's times when we are closer to God, and there's times when we kind of get away from God, and so we don't turn to him right away. But in the sense that we ought to desire to have that close walk, and that close walk would keep us from turning away when things go bad. We would turn to him instead. And David says there, "I stretch forth my hands unto thee, my soul thirsteth after thee." And again, I think it just is that word picture that I know God is good, and I know God will answer my prayer, and I know that God is who I turn to in need. And then he says there in that second, "My soul thirsteth after thee." Oh, because God has been so good, and God has answered prayer, and God has blessed me in the past. And I know that God will continue to bless me. And then he says, "Selah." Stop and think about it, people. I understand the thought. I know you understand the thought, and I want you to think on it, because that'll keep you close to him. That'll keep that desire fresh in your mind, in your heart, to seek after God more and more. And so as we review, I hope, as David said, see love, that we have thought about this week. And there was some, at the end of the service last week, a few people said that was good, that was a blessing. I know I saw some things on Facebook, and that's an encouragement to me. But my prayer was that we didn't just get all excited for one night and, oh, that was a great message, and man, that was exciting, and wow, God, that God is awesome. But then we walk out the door and we go about our way. We get busy Monday morning, or it would have been Thursday morning. The weekend comes, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and we didn't think about God at all. So my prayer is that as we get excited, and as God answers prayer, and as God talks to us in the messages, that we take time to think on those things, that we allow, again, to meditate. We said last week the 3 M's there in verse number 5, that I remember, my memory, I meditate, and I muse. And that word muse, remember, was to ponder, to think on, to allow it to affect me. I think on it, I ponder on it. And so number 1, just kind of in review, we remember this as a prayer. We saw that last week. It's a personal conversation and an outpouring of David to his God. And that's what I think. He just says, hear my prayer, O Lord, give ear to my supplications. And I want us to also understand this. I think sometimes we probably know better, but sometimes we think about prayer as being something, okay, I come over here and I pray. Or I get my prayer list out and I pray. Or I need to set some time aside and pray. And yes, there are times for that. But there's a time when, as David is doing, hear my prayer, O God, and as I'm going through life, and as my day is unfolding before me, I'm simply in conversation with God all day. I'm talking to Him as a best friend. And David's saying, hear my prayer, give ear to my supplications. I'm just pouring my heart out to my best friend. And so I think prayer, sometimes we need to get it out of the box of, here's prayer, and here's life. Prayer can be a conversation all day long with our God. Amen. And it just makes it so much sweeter. Number 2, David asked God to deal with his enemy, verse number 3. But in verse 2, David is careful again to acknowledge his sin, his shortcomings, and his deserving of God's judgment as well. And I think we're good to understand that. Notice again, verse 2, enter not into judgment with thy servant, for in thy sight shall no man living be justified. For the enemy hath persecuted my soul. He hath smitten my life down to the ground. He hath made me to dwell in darkness as those that have been long dead. Verses number 9, he says, I flee from mine enemies, or deliver me, O Lord, from my enemies. I flee unto thee to hide. Verse 12, and of thy mercy cut off mine enemies. Destroy all of them that afflict my soul, for I am thy servant. And so again, I think this maybe is a word of caution in verse number 2. When we want God, we seek God's vengeance on somebody, or we want God to just, give them what they deserve. Understand, God didn't give us what we deserve, and God doesn't always give us what we deserve. Right. And if it wasn't for God's grace and mercy in our lives, we probably wouldn't be standing here before you tonight. Thankful for the grace of God in my life. So there's a caution in there that when I'm seeking the vengeance of God on somebody else, or I want God's justice on that person now, I need to remember, I don't want God's justice on my life right now. I don't want God's vengeance on me. I want grace and mercy. So remember that when you're seeking it on somebody else, because we're sinners too, and we need God's grace and mercy. And so be careful in those times. And then again, we pointed out the 3 M's: memory, meditate, and muse. We can commemorate the general, what God has done in the past, what God has done for others, what we've seen Him do for others, or maybe it for our church. But then there's also the personal side of it, what He's done for me. And David's saying there that I muse on the work of thy hands, what He's done for me. Remember, David, we said, was watching the sheep, and the lion and the bear came, and God delivered them into his hand. He went to face the Philistine, Goliath, and God delivered him into his hand. And those are things that, no matter how rough life's getting, and David's pouring out his heart, saying, I'm at the end of my wits, I'm hanging on by a string, but I remember, God, when you did this for me, and when you did that for me, and when you did that, when you delivered that lion and that bear and that giant, and I'm trusting you now to deliver me again. And so, the same thing for us. We can remember the things He's done. And again, as we gain knowledge of Him and who He is, we long for Him. And as we grow to know Him, and love him more, we turn to him and look for his deliverance when things like this come into our lives. So let's pray, and then we'll begin into verse number 7 there. Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you for the evening, Lord, and just for your many blessings in our lives. Again, for your answer to prayer, your provision for us, Lord, in life, physically and financially, Lord, spiritually and health-wise. You've been very good to us, Lord, and life sometimes beats up on us and things pile up around us, and we can get our eyes, our focus off of you and allow those to bother us. Lord, but ultimately, when we look up, we see you and understand how good and how great you are. And I pray, Lord, as we focus on these truths that, yes, our hearts are excited. Yes, we get excited about it. Yes, it makes us feel good and Lord, all those emotions that come with that. But, Lord, I pray that it doesn't just fan out in an evening or two. Lord, I pray that it is something that carries us through the rest of the week. It is something that, Lord, allows us, when trials and troubles come into our lives, to look to you for answers. I pray you help us tonight. Help me as I teach. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. So now we get in, he says there in verse number 7, after you stopped and thought about it, he kind of gets back into this where he's praying. And he says, hear me speedily. And I think that as David says that, he's found himself low and things are piling up on him. He's feeling the pressure of life. He says that the enemy, Satan, he gives it to, I guess, has persecuted my soul. He's smitten my life down to the ground. He's made me to dwell in darkness. And the idea is he's just he's whacked me. He's taken away everything. And I'm just feeling like he's just pummeled me to the ground. And I think maybe an example that we can think of is Job. Job has went from riches and having everything and a family to one at a time. His kids come to him and say, hey, this just happened and the cattle are all gone. This just happened and the house fell down. And now all of a sudden his kids are all gone. And then Job's sitting on the heap, scraping his sores. And he's gone from everything to nothing. And how could you not feel like, man, my soul's just in the pit. I have nothing else to turn to. Why is this happening to me? And so David is asking now, he's feeling the same way. And he says, hear me speedily. And so I believe in verses 7 through 9, if you read there, he says, hear me speedily, O Lord, my spirit faileth. Hide not thy face from me, lest I be like unto them that go down into the pit. Cause me to hear thy loving kindness in the morning, for in thee do I trust. Cause me to know the way wherein I should walk, for I lift up my soul unto thee. Deliver me, O Lord, from my enemies. I flee unto thee to hide me. And so he asked for a quick response. And again, I think in 911, what's your emergency? And God is always there. And we said this in the Jonah study, is that God never gives us a busy signal. God's never too busy to hear us. And when we cry out to God and we say, I need you to hear me speedily, the sense is I need a quick response. I'm not wanting to wait, I think David's saying. I need you to hear me. I'm in trouble, God, and I need help. And I need some relief. And so he says that. I need a quick response. Hear me speedily. And when David prayed, he did want instant answers. And he's wanting God to work on his behalf. Not without reason, and he's not demanding God outside of, I believe, what is right, a right response to these things. And it's because of the importance. And so David's not saying, listen, God, I'm so important, I need you to hear me now. What David's saying is, God, I'm in trouble. I'm at the end of my rope, and I need you to help me. And so he wanted deliverance from his enemies. He wanted, I believe, to keep and maintain his testimony. Have you ever got to the place where somebody's riding you or the situation's on you and you have to say something and you just, God, please help me. Help me to maintain my testimony. Because I just want to punch this person in the face right now. I just want to tell them what it is that they need to hear, but God, please help me maintain my testimony. And I believe that David's feeling that. His enemies are around him. We talked about last week how they're cutting him down, they're talking bad about him, and David probably wants in the flesh to handle it. And he's saying, God, hear me speedily. Please help me. Help me save and maintain my testimony. Not allow these people, or not allow Satan especially, to have this victory over me. God, I want to have victory, but I need your help to have victory in my life. And then he wanted God to immediately intervene and come to his rescue. And notice again, verse 8, he says he wants the answer by morning. Cause me to hear thy loving kindness in the morning. And there are times, I believe, we just go to bed and maybe we are at the end of our wits, or we need an answer and it just doesn't seem like it's coming. We say, God, please. Or we spend a period of time through the night praying, and we're on our knees and we're asking God to give us an answer. And so he says there again, he wants the answer by morning. And again, I believe it's specifics in prayer. God, please answer my prayer in the morning. Please answer me and give me an answer. He's not, again, demanding it, but telling God what he would like. He's simply sharing his heart with the one he knows can answer, with his God that he knows has the ability to answer it. And then we see, I believe there in verses 7 and 8, 4 reasons why he wanted a quick answer. Notice verse 7. He says, cause me to hear thy loving kindness in the morning, for in thee do I trust. And so, number one is that, let me read some more. That he trusts, he says, cause me to know the way wherein I should go, for I lift up my soul unto thee. I'm in verse 8, Verse 7, hear me speedily, O Lord, my spirit faileth. Hide not thy face from me, lest I be like unto them that go down into the pit. So, reason number one, he says he would become like those who go down into the pit. David needed a quick answer because he literally felt like he was going to die. The pressure, the turmoil in his life, everything that Satan's pounding on him, and he's saying, I feel like I'm going down to the pit. I feel like I'm going to die. And so I think, again, you go back up to verses 3 and 4, it's just this emotional and spiritual strain on him. The enemy hath persecuted my soul. He hath smitten my life down to the ground. He hath made me to dwell in darkness, as those that have been long dead. Have you ever felt that way? You ever just feel like you've just been beaten and left for dead? Verse 4, therefore is my spirit overwhelmed within me. My heart within me is desolate. He just had no answer. He had nowhere else to turn. And so he's saying that, the emotional and mental strain, and he asked God, hide not your face. I believe I want to be able to see it. But again, the fact that you ever see, don't turn a blind eye, right? God, I want you to see what's going on in my life. Don't hide your face from me. Look and see where I'm at. Understand that I'm seeking an answer and that I want to please you. Number 2, he trusts in the Lord. Verse number 8 there, cause me to hear thy loving kindness in the morning, for in thee do I trust. This is what trouble should do. It should cause us to trust in God. It should cause us to turn to God and to look for an answer. To hear his loving kindness, David says, the goodness, the fairness, the holiness and justice of a God is the opposite of everything going on in this world today. God is holy. God is just. God is right. And so when the world is bombarding us with what it has, and we turn to a holy, just God, and we trust him to deliver us. And so that's where David's at. God permits us to get into situations in which we can trust him. And I believe we've seen this in the last month. God will stretch our faith because we trust in him. And God will sometimes allow us to get into those situations where we can do nothing but trust him. And then the second part of that is that it grows our confidence in him. Remember we said that David looks back to God and remembers the remembrance, those musings. Well, that's because he already had past experiences that he could look back to. So if you and I went through life and we never had these experiences, we went through life and everything was always, always, always good, we would never, when we came to something wrong, be able to look back and say, I remember when God delivered me from that. I remember when God answered that prayer. I remember when God provided right there. I remember when God answered that. We can look back on those times now because we've been through those. And so that's what David's doing. God stretches our faith, but God also grows our confidence in him because we can look back at times when God and God alone could have answered those prayers. Amen. Reason number 3, verse 8b, is that he needs God to teach him the way to walk. Notice there in the last part of verse 8, he says, cause me to know the way wherein I should walk, for I lift up my soul unto thee. So again, coming in that is that I want to see your loving kindness in the morning. I want you to answer me in the morning. I'm trusting in you, but I also need you to teach me how to walk. I need you to teach me where to walk. And so part of trusting God is allowing God to lead and direct us. Because I can say all day long, oh yeah, I trust God. I believe in God. But then when I face that trial, and as we've been preaching on Sunday nights, right? I start to run from the trouble, or I try to separate it from God, or I try to do those other 3 of the other 5 things we've been talking about on Sunday nights. Am I trusting God? No. I'm trusting me. I'm trusting my abilities. I'm trusting the finances I have. I'm not trusting God. And so David says, yes, I trust God, but God, I need you to teach me and show me where to walk. I need you to lead me. And real life is that way. There's a lot of things that, yes, I could just grab and run with and make a decision and let's go. And there's some times when you just need to stop and say, I'll make a decision, but we're going to see God first. Okay? And yes, it might be nice to have an answer right now, but we're going to seek God first. Because I trust God, and God will give us an answer when it's time to have an answer. God will give us direction when it's time to move, not before. And so, again, it's applicable to us every day. It's not just something that happened way back when David penned Psalm 143. This is what God does today as well. And so, in number 3, we need God to teach us the way to walk. We need to be taught by God in the ways that we should walk when we're in trouble. Because again, our fleshly response, our sin nature, likes to grab control and try to handle it. Our sin nature, our flesh nature, likes to run from it. We have our responses, but yet sometimes we just got to wait on God. It's one thing, again, to pray to get out of trouble. It's another to ask God to teach us how to live when we are in trouble. Okay? And again, you think of some godly pastors that have spent time in jail because they've been faithful to the Word of God. You think maybe of some martyrs that have died because they've been faithful to the Word of God. How do I live through that? How do I remain faithful to God through that? It's by simply being faithful to God. When they're burning at the stake and they're giving praise to God and they're singing to God, or they have the option to say and renounce God or burn at the stake, and they say, I would never renounce my God. That is living by faith. That is trusting God to the very end. That's hard. But God can give you the ability. God can give you the grace to do so. So again, it's one thing to say it. It's another thing to live it. It's one thing to be able to pray it and proclaim it. It's another thing to be able to do it. And so, number 4, again, David says, reason number 4, he's asking God for a quick answer is that he takes his refuge in his relationship with God. Notice verse number 9. He says, deliver me, O Lord, from mine enemies. I flee unto thee to hide me. And again, I love the Word of God. I just love reading it and thinking in the sense that I remember being a little boy and we're walking by my grandma's house and this dog comes running out. And I don't remember, it might have been a Chihuahua, but to me, it was the biggest dog I ever saw. And I half climbed up my dad, who was not much taller than me now, and that dog jumping up on my dad, but as high as I could get on his shoulders, I wanted my dad to deliver me. In the sense that David's saying, I hide behind you to protect me. And the same thing I would do for either of my 2 boys today. I don't care what it is, as little as I am, I would do everything I can to protect them. I can go to God who's bigger than anyone. I can go to God that's bigger than any problem in the world. I can go to God that not even Satan can go through. Satan has to ask permission. Can I go mess with Job? Yeah, you can mess with him today. Oh, but Satan, you can't take his life. Oh, but God, he'll curse you and die if you let me. Okay, you can mess with his health, but you can't take his life. Satan has to ask God permission. Satan is a creative being. He's we serve a great God. Amen. And so he says, David, this is David under pressure saying, look, deliver me, O Lord, from mine enemies. I flee unto thee to hide me. Flee to God, run to God, allow God to protect you. Don't take it in your own hands. When most people find themselves in difficulty, they do not run to God as a refuge. But David did, and we ought to. Many times we run to friends, we run to doctors, we run to social media, books and magazines, self-help, whatever it is. And God's the last one we go to. God's our last resort. When God ought to be so hand in hand and in such constant communication that he's the first person that knows what's going on. And so that's what we can see from David. And again, remember, let's again notice the end of verse 6. He's saying all these pressures. Verse number 3, the enemy, Satan is just beating on me. I come to verse 6, I stretch out my hands unto thee, my soul thirsteth after thee as a thirsty land. That's thirsty. I'm seeking God. Selah, stop and think about it. And then again, let's read starting in verse 7. Hear me speedily, O Lord, my spirit faileth. Hide not thy face from me, lest I be like unto them that go down into the pit. Cause me to hear thy loving kindness in the morning, for in thee do I trust. Cause me to know the way wherein I should walk, for I lift up my soul unto thee. Deliver me, O Lord, from my enemies. I flee unto thee to hide me. And so we just simply see David's heart there. He's asking God to protect him and deliver him and allow him to maintain that testimony. And now we get into verse number 10 through 12, and we see that David's asking God, I believe, to just spiritually develop him. I have an understanding of who you are. I'm placing all my faith and trust in you. But God, I want to come out on the end a better person. I want to come out on the end a better Christian. I want to be stronger in my faith for having gone through it. Again, if I go through the lesson, even in a school classroom, what good does it do me to go through the class and to spend the time in the class and maybe even ace the test if I didn't learn anything from it? It could be all academic, but I didn't gain any knowledge from it. And David's saying, yes, we can pass through trials in life and sometimes ace them and not really come out any better. And David's asking God here, notice verse 10, teach me to do thy will, for thou art my God. Thy spirit is good. Lead me into the land of uprightness. Quicken me. And that's the idea, make me alive, or we might say revive me, O Lord, for thy name's sake, for thy righteousness' sake. Bring my soul out of trouble. And of thy mercy cut off mine enemies, and destroy all them that afflict my soul, for I am thy servant. So again, with the idea that he wants to spiritually develop, and I wrote in my notes, wow, spiritual maturity. That's a spiritually mature Christian that would ask God, look, I'm struggling. I'm at the end of my ropes. But God, I would like to grow. I would like to come out of this more mature, more spiritual, growing in my spiritual walk with you. To have this mindset in the midst of trouble, that's a mature Christian. There are 6 desires, I believe, we can see that David had in these verses. Number 1, he wanted God to teach him. Verse 10, there he says, teach me to do thy will. There are lessons to be learned when we're going through difficult times. And God can be the teacher like no other. God can teach us those things. God is able to teach us those lessons if we ask him and desire to learn them. Okay, we can ask God all kinds of things, but then not submit to the lesson, right? We can go through the lesson and not be willing to take the test. And God says, I won't give you anything. I won't allow you to go anything that you're not able to do. So trust God. Go through it. Allow him to teach you through that. Number 2, David wanted God's Spirit to lead him. Notice there again in verse number 10. Teach me to do thy will, for thou art my God. Thy Spirit is good. Lead me into the land of uprightness. So David wants God to lead him. And he just proclaims again, God's Spirit is good. And so from that we gather that God's Spirit being good is only going to lead us in good things. He's only going to lead us into that which is good. And so as we submit to the Lord and as we do what's right and we're asking God to lead us, he's going to lead us into good. And I believe, again, it works 2 ways, right? We as a Christian school need some good teachers to fill some vacancies. We pray for a good teacher. We pray that God will send us good teachers. God sends us some people. On the other hand, here's some teachers that are good people, looking for a good Christian school, looking for a good job, praying and asking God to send them to the right place. God's answering prayers on both sides. And God brings good people to good places. And I know not a whole lot of teenagers and young people in here, but God will lead you to the right mate. You don't have to run out and grab the first girl that looks at you and says, right? You don't have to look at the first guy that says, her, I'll pay for you. Right? I'll buy it all. You can. I'll stop. You don't. Because if you're doing what God has called you to do, and you're doing what's right, and you're pursuing God 100%, God's going to lead you in the right direction. If she's over here doing what's right, and she's pursuing God, God's going to lead her in the right direction. And lo and behold, bang! Your paths are going to cross, and you're going to look at her and say, that's the right one. She's going to look at you and say, that's the right one. 18 years later, you'll be serving the Lord together, doing something you never dreamed you'd be doing. Amen. Together, because God crossed your paths. It's amazing. But we as Christians want to jump and grab and run and get outside of God's will. Understand, God, the Holy Spirit, is a good God. Amen. And He's only going to do good things. So if we follow Him and allow Him to lead us and direct us, and we ask Him to teach us and ask Him to lead us, and we allow Him to do that, we've only got good things coming. Yes, there will be trials. Yes, there's trouble. Yes, people try to cause problems. But that's all the spiritual principalities and powers of the air. That's Satan messing with you. Pursue God. Stay with God. And God will take care of the little things. God will take care of Satan. But God will put you in the right place for the right person, the right time, whatever it might be in your life. Number 3, I was just going to say that Romans 8:28. All things work together for good to those who love God, who are called according to His purpose. If you're called according to His purpose and you're pursuing His purpose in your life and you love Him with all your heart, you don't think that God would do what's right by you? You don't think that God would provide and do right by you? He will. Number 3, verse 11. David wanted God to revive him. He says there, quicken me, O Lord, for thy name's sake. Again, I said, quicken me, make me alive, revive me, God. And yes, again, David's a Christian. David's trying to live right. David's the man after God's own heart. But life beats on you sometimes. And sometimes you just find yourself beat on and beat on and beat on. And you're just holding that rope with all you've got. And you're just sliding, you're slipping to the end. And you say, God, quicken me, make me alive, revive me, God. And He says, notice, not for me, not because I deserve it, revive me, quicken me, O Lord, for thy name's sake. Because in the end, when God quickens us and He revives us, that little spark in us begins sparking to other people. Quicken me. Listen to that tape. Mr. Long gave me a tape to listen to. I believe, as Billy Sunday said, a little spark will prove that a keg of powder has more power in it than a book full of library book, than a library full of books that tells you how much power that powder keg has. One little spark will prove it to you in a second how much power is in that barrel of powder. You can read books all day long and tell you about it, and you'll never fully understand it. But you allow God to revive your heart, and just a little spark, you'll see it make a difference, and it'll catch on in other hearts. And so David's asking God, revive me, God. I don't know where that. So, okay, to make him alive, he wants to restore the joy, he wants the excitement. Number 4, verse 11b, David wants God to bring him out of trouble. Again, notice it's for God's sake. He says, quicken me, O Lord, for thy name's sake, for thy righteousness' sake, bring my soul out of trouble. Again, for your sake, revive me. For your righteousness' sake, bring me out of trouble. Because, again, out of trouble, what can I do? Focus on serving God. Focus on doing what is right. Maybe focus on ministry. Focus on doing things better. But understand, Christian, there are times I need to go through trouble. I need to be buckled down underneath the weight of things. I need to be made to turn to God so that my desire, again, is to move forward. Right? Because, again, we can get... I was reading an article this week talking about road delirium, right? You ever just driving and you're just trying to stay awake? It's just mind-numbing. Or you travel miles on the road and think, man, did I pass that exit? We were going to stop at that restaurant. Well, we passed that a long time ago. But because you're just... And the same thing happens, Christian, in the Christian life. As we're just along and everything's going well, we forget. We're not so aware and we're not paying so much attention. And sometimes God has to put us under that pressure so that we again look at Him and we get back to the basics of life. And so David's asking for that. He wants God to deliver him out of his trouble for God's sake. It is nice sometimes just to be status quo, right? Oh, the finances are good, life's good. The kids are behaving themselves, the family's happy, oh, life's good. So that is nice sometimes, okay? But the mountaintops are great for a bit. The valleys provide opportunity for growth. But sometimes it's just nice to breathe. And that's what David's saying. Oh, just give me some time. Give me some time to be status quo. Give me some time to be on the mountaintop where I can catch my breath, and then I'll go back at it again. Number 5, David wanted to cut off his enemies. In verse number 12, he says, "Of thy mercy cut off mine enemies, and destroy all them that afflict my soul, for I am thy servant." And again, I would just point out there, thinking on it today, of thy mercy cut off mine enemies. Mercy is withholding what we don't deserve, right? And so he's saying, of your mercy, cut off my enemies, destroy all them that afflict my soul. And the reason, again, we looked at last week, or we mentioned last week, he says, for I am thy servant. And I think that makes all the difference in the world. God, I don't want your vengeance. I don't want your justice. I don't want everything I deserve, but I'm your servant. This guy's just in. This guy's out to get me. And so David prays that. And notice how many enemies he wanted God to eliminate. He says all of them. David wanted God to destroy his enemies, but to be merciful to him. David was willing to talk to God about them and then leave it to God to destroy them. And again, we just take things to God and let him deal with it. Enemies can do you great harm. And when we're attacked, we need to pray. That is what David did. And he ended the psalm by reminding God that he was God's servant. And again, if you don't think that God's a good God and that he'll take care of you, I don't know what you're in this for. God is a good God, and God will protect you. He'll take care of you. So I ask you, are you God's servant tonight? If not, you can be. You can be saved tonight. God will save you. If you are, you have access to an all-knowing, all-powerful God who loves and cares for you. He understands your needs, your hurts, your troubles, and your desires. But he also desires for you to bring them to him and leave them with him. He will never give you more than you're able to bear. He never tempts man with sin, so when we get ourselves into these situations, that's our own doing. And then he never, so in closing, I would ask us, let's commit to prayer, asking God to deliver, teach, and quicken us. Let's remember to meditate and to muse on the things of God, who he is, and what he does, and what he has done. Let's pray. Heavenly